6 months of looking over her shoulder, 6 months of counting every dollar twice, 6 months of jumping at shadows, and Maya Chin still couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus would find her. She balanced the silver serving tray with practiced grace, her nursing student hands steady despite the fear that lived in her chest like a constant weight. At Zenith Restaurant, Seoul's most exclusive dining establishment, she served Korea's elite while saving everyone toward a future that felt both desperately close and impossibly far away. At 24, Maya had rebuilt her life from the ground up after escaping to Seoul. The fine dining position at Zenith paid well enough to cover her tiny studio apartment, nursing school tuition, and the slow accumulation of an emergency fund that currently held exactly 47,000 won. Not enough to disappear again if she had to. She was practical, focused, and knew the value of every coin that crossed her palm. Her natural hair fell in carefully maintained waves that caught the warm restaurant lighting, and her dark eyes held a wariness that made her excellent at reading customers' needs before they voiced them. She moved through the dining room with quiet efficiency, professional and polite, invisible in the way service workers learned to be. Maya had chosen Zenith specifically because it attracted international business clients, diplomats, and wealthy Koreans who rarely paid attention to the staff. The restaurant occupied the top floor of a glass tower in Gangnam, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern minimalist design, the kind of place where a single meal cost more than she made in a week. She had been working there for 4 months without incident, slowly building the confidence that maybe, just maybe, Marcus couldn't track her across an ocean. Tonight felt different. Maya couldn't name the source of her unease, but something in the air had shifted. She moved between tables with extra caution, hyper-aware of every customer's face, every voice in the dining room. Table 12 held a single diner who had commanded her attention from the moment he walked in, though she couldn't say exactly why. He was a study in controlled precision. This Korean man in his late 30s who wore an impeccably tailored midnight blue suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Kim Tae-young, according to the reservation list, though the name meant nothing to her. Everything about him suggested wealth and authority, from the custom cut of his jacket to the way other staff members straightened unconsciously when they passed his table. He had sharp, angular features, dark hair swept back with mathematical precision, and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. His presence created a subtle gravitational pull in the dining room, other conversations quieting slightly, servers moving with extra care. Maya had served him twice before over the past month. He always requested the same corner booth, always ordered the same meal, always paid in cash with bills so crisp they might have come fresh from the mint. He was polite but distant, spoke perfect English with barely a trace of accent, and left tips that were generous but not memorable. What struck her most was how he watched everything, not in an obvious way, but with the peripheral awareness of someone accustomed to cataloging threats and opportunities. She approached his table with the evening's wine selection, moving with the careful grace that kept expensive bottles intact and customers satisfied. "Good evening, Mr. Kim. Tonight's featured wines include a French Bordeaux and a California Pinot Noir. Would you like to hear about our sommelier's recommendations?" His dark eyes lifted to her face with the same measured attention he gave everything else. "The Bordeaux will be fine." His voice carried quiet authority, the tone of someone who expected to be obeyed without question. Maya nodded and turned toward the wine station, her practiced smile remaining in place. She had learned to read customers quickly, and Kim Tae-young radiated the particular stillness of someone very dangerous pretending to be civilized. Not dangerous to her specifically, but dangerous in the way of caged predators who chose their moments carefully. She was retrieving the bottle from the climate-controlled storage when the front door chimed, and her world tilted sideways. Marcus Johnson walked into Zenith like he owned the place, his arm around a blonde woman Maya didn't recognize. 6'2" and broadly built, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him well but lacked the expensive precision of the restaurant's usual clientele. His light brown skin looked healthy and prosperous, his smile confident as he surveyed the dining room like a man without a care in the world. Maya's hands went numb. The wine bottle slipped from her fingers and shattered against the polished concrete floor, sending burgundy liquid and glass fragments across the pristine surface. The sound echoed through the quiet restaurant like a gunshot, conversation stopping as every head turned toward the source of disruption. Her heart hammered against her ribs so violently she was certain everyone could hear it. Marcus, here, in Seoul, in her sanctuary. He spotted her immediately, his confident smile widening into something predatory and satisfied. There's my girl, he called across the restaurant, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. Maya, baby, look at you. Playing dress up like you're somebody important. Maya backed against the wine storage unit, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. This wasn't possible. She had been so careful. Changed her name on the employment documents, used her mother's maiden name, paid everything in cash, avoided social media completely. How had he found her? Marcus approached with leisurely confidence, leaving his date at the hostess station as he closed the distance between them. The restaurant staff stood frozen, uncertain whether this was a pleasant reunion or something more troubling. Maya felt every eye in the room on her, including the sharp, measuring gaze from table 12. Baby, you look good, Marcus said, reaching out to touch her face. Maya flinched violently, stepping sideways to avoid contact. His expression darkened immediately. Now that's not very friendly. After I came all this way to see you. I'm working, Maya managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Please leave. Working. Marcus laughed, the sound harsh and familiar. Playing waitress in some fancy restaurant, pretending you're not still the same broken little girl who needs me to take care of her. He stepped closer, crowding her against the wine storage. You think you can just run away from me? You think you can just disappear? His hand shot out and gripped her wrist, his fingers finding exactly the spot where old fractures had healed improperly. Maya couldn't stop the sharp intake of breath, the instinctive attempt to pull away that only made his grip tighten. See, Marcus said, his voice dropping to the intimate tone that used to precede violence. You still react the same way. Still need someone to remind you how the world really works. From the corner of her eye, Maya saw movement at table 12. Kim Tae-young had risen from his seat with fluid grace, his attention fixed on their interaction with laser focus. He didn't approach immediately, but something in his posture had shifted, the casual diner disappearing behind something much more dangerous. Let go, Maya whispered, still trying to extract her wrist from Marcus's grip. Or what? Marcus asked, squeezing harder. You'll call security. You'll make a scene. You'll embarrass yourself in front of all these nice people who think you're respectable now. The bruises were already forming under his fingers, dark marks that would take weeks to heal completely. Maya felt the familiar combination of rage and helplessness that had defined too many years of her life, the knowledge that fighting back would only make things worse. That was when Kim Tae-young's voice cut through the restaurant like a blade. Release her immediately. The words carried absolute authority, spoken in Korean first and then repeated in English, the tone leaving no room for interpretation or negotiation. Marcus turned toward the voice, still gripping Maya's wrist, his expression shifting from confident to cautious as he took in Tae-young's appearance and bearing. This is a private conversation, Marcus said, but some of his bravado had evaporated. Tae-young moved closer with predatory grace, his expensive suit and controlled movements marking him as someone whose polite suggestions were actually commands. I said release her. The temperature in the restaurant seemed to drop several degrees. Marcus hesitated, clearly recognizing that he had stumbled into something beyond his understanding, but his pride wouldn't let him back down completely. Look, friend, this is between me and my girl here. We're just having a little chat. Tae-young's eyes moved to Maya's wrist, taking in the finger-shaped bruises already blooming under Marcus's grip, then back to Marcus's face with an expression that promised absolutely nothing good. Your conversation is concluded. Leave now. The restaurant had gone completely silent, even the kitchen staff emerging to watch the confrontation. Maya felt caught between two dangerous men, her wrist still trapped in Marcus's increasingly uncomfortable grip, while Kim Tae-young radiated the kind of lethal stillness that made her understand exactly why he commanded such unconscious respect. Marcus finally released her wrist, stepping back, but not retreating entirely. We're not done talking, Maya. You know you can't hide from me forever. He turned and walked back toward his date, his swagger restored now that he was no longer directly challenging Tae-young's authority. They left together, Marcus's voice carrying back toward the dining room as he complained loudly about the restaurant's hostile atmosphere. Maya stood frozen against the wine storage, her wrist throbbing and her entire body shaking with adrenaline and delayed terror. The other diners gradually returned to their conversations, the staff beginning to clean up the broken wine bottle, normal restaurant operations slowly resuming. Kim Tae-young approached her with careful steps, his movements deliberately non-threatening. "Are you injured beyond the bruises on your wrist?" Maya shook her head, not trusting her voice to remain steady. He reached into his jacket and produced a pristine white business card, placing it carefully on the nearby service counter. "When you're ready to ensure he never touches you again, call the number on this card." "I can handle this myself," Maya whispered, though they both knew it was a lie. Tae-young's dark eyes held hers with gentle but implacable certainty. "No, Maya-chun. You cannot. But I can." He returned to his table without another word, left cash for his meal plus enough to cover the broken wine bottle, and departed as quietly as he had dined. Maya stared at the business card for a long moment, noting the expensive paper stock and the single phone number printed in elegant script. That night, she lay awake in her tiny studio apartment, her wrist aching and her mind racing. Marcus had found her once. He would find her again. And next time, there might not be a dangerous stranger willing to intervene on her behalf. The business card sat on her nightstand, pristine white in the moonlight streaming through her single window. Maya stared at it until dawn, knowing that calling the number would change everything, and knowing that not calling it might leave her with no future to change. Maya barely made it to the staff bathroom before her legs gave out. She locked the door behind her and sank onto the cold tile floor, her whole body shaking with delayed shock and adrenaline. The fluorescent lighting buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made her reflection look pale and haunted in the mirror above the sink. "He found me." The thoughts circled in her mind like a trapped bird. Marcus found me across an ocean, in a country where I changed my name, where I paid cash for everything, where I thought I was invisible. If he could find her here, he could find her anywhere. Her wrist throbbed where his fingers had gripped, the bruises already darkening to deep purple against her brown skin. She knew those marks intimately, remembered exactly how much pressure created what shade of damage. For years of that knowledge burned into her body's memory. Maya pulled herself to her feet and splashed cold water on her face, trying to wash away the panic and think clearly. She had to finish her shift. She needed the money. She needed normal routine to convince herself that one terrible encounter hadn't destroyed everything she had worked to build. But her hands wouldn't stop trembling as she returned to the dining room. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of mechanical motions. Pour wine, take orders, smile politely, pretend her world hadn't just collapsed. Table 12 remained empty, Kim Tae-young's crisp bills still sitting on the polished wood surface along with his business card. When closing time finally arrived, Maya helped the other staff with cleanup while her mind raced through impossible options. She could run again, but where? And with what money? She could stay and hope Marcus would lose interest, but she knew better. Marcus didn't give up. Marcus didn't let go. The restaurant emptied gradually, staff members saying goodnight as they headed home to families and normal lives. Maya lingered, unwilling to face the walk to her apartment where Marcus might be waiting. She was gathering her courage to leave when she noticed the figure leaning against the building across the street. Kim Tae-young stood under a streetlight, his midnight blue suit immaculate despite the late hour, his attention focused entirely on the restaurant entrance. He straightened as she emerged, crossing the street with measured steps that somehow covered ground faster than seemed possible. "You waited," Maya said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I wanted to ensure you reached home safely." His dark eyes studied her face with careful intensity. "The man who threatened you tonight will not simply disappear because he was asked politely to leave." Maya clutched her purse tighter, feeling the weight of her tips and the business card she had slipped inside. "I told you, I can handle this myself." Tae-young's expression remained patient but implacable. "How long have you been running from him?" The question hit too close to truth. Maya lifted her chin defensively. "I'm not running. I moved to Seoul for school." "How long, Maya?" Something in his tone made lies impossible. 6 months, she whispered. "And before that?" "For years." The admission escaped before she could stop it. Taeyong nodded as if her answer confirmed something he already knew. Men like Marcus Johnson do not stop hunting what they consider theirs. They escalate until someone makes them stop permanently. The casual way he said Marcus's full name made Maya's blood run cold. You know his name. I know everything I need to know. Taeyong reached into his jacket and produced a second business card identical to the first. This contains a different number. If he approaches you again, call immediately. Do not hesitate. Do not try to handle the situation yourself. What exactly are you offering? Maya asked, though part of her already understood. Protection. Taeyong's voice carried absolute certainty. Complete and permanent protection. Maya stared at the card, its expensive paper stock somehow ominous in the streetlight. And what would that cost me? Nothing you're not already paying. Taeyong stepped back, giving her space while maintaining eye contact. The only difference is that your payment would purchase actual safety instead of temporary hiding. He turned and walked away without another word, disappearing into a sleek black sedan that materialized from the shadows with silent efficiency. Maya stood alone on the empty street, two identical business cards in her possession and the terrible knowledge that Marcus was somewhere in Seoul, planning his next move. The walk to her studio apartment took 12 minutes through well-lit streets that suddenly felt hostile and exposed. Maya used every technique she had learned during her months of hypervigilance, checking reflections in storefront windows, varying her route, pausing at corners to scan for familiar faces. Her building was a modest 6-story structure in a working-class neighborhood, the kind of place where no one asked questions and rent payments bought anonymity along with shelter. Maya climbed the stairs to the 4th floor, her keys ready before she reached her door. The lock had been forced. Maya's heart stopped. The metal door frame was bent where someone had used a crowbar or similar tool to gain entry, the wood splintered and hanging loose. Her door stood slightly ajar, darkness visible through the gap. She should call the police. She should call building security. She should run. Instead, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. Her studio apartment had been methodically destroyed. Furniture overturned, drawers emptied, her carefully maintained possessions scattered across the floor like debris from an explosion. Her laptop lay in pieces. Her nursing textbooks had pages torn out and scattered. Her clothes were shredded with what looked like a knife. But the worst damage was in the corner where she kept her emergency fund. The coffee can that had held 47,001 was empty, crushed flat, and thrown against the wall. 4 months of saved tips, gone. A note lay on her overturned mattress, written in Marcus's familiar handwriting. Running away was disrespectful, Maya. Embarrassing me tonight was unforgivable. We need to have a serious conversation about your attitude. I'll be in touch. Maya sank to her knees among the wreckage of her life, finally understanding that Marcus had never intended to have a conversation in the restaurant. He had wanted her to see him with another woman, wanted her to know he could reach her anywhere, wanted her to understand that her independence was an illusion he could shatter whenever he chose. She was still kneeling there an hour later when the explosion lit up the night. The sound was enormous, a deep percussion that rattled windows throughout the neighborhood and set car alarms screaming. Maya ran to her window and looked down at the street below, where a car was engulfed in flames. Orange light flickered against the surrounding buildings, and sirens wailed in the distance as emergency vehicles raced toward the scene. Even from 4 stories up, even through the smoke and flames, Maya recognized the charcoal-colored sedan Marcus had been driving. She stood at the window for a long time, watching firefighters extinguish the blaze and police establish a perimeter. Watching ambulance crews remove what remained of the driver. Watching investigators photograph the scene and interview witnesses who claimed to have seen nothing useful. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The threat has been eliminated. You are safe now. We should discuss your future arrangements. Maya stared at the message until her vision blurred. Marcus was dead. Eliminated with professional efficiency less than 3 hours after threatening her in public. The man who had haunted her dreams for 6 months, who had controlled and terrorized her for 4 years before that, who had seemed as permanent and inescapable as gravity itself, was gone. She should feel relieved. She should feel grateful. Instead, she felt hollow and strange, like someone had rearranged the fundamental laws of physics while she wasn't paying attention. Another text arrived 20 minutes later. I'm outside your building. May I come up? Maya looked down at the street and saw Kim Tae-young standing beside a different black sedan, his expensive suit replaced with dark jeans and a leather jacket, but his bearing unchanged. He looked up at her window, as if he could sense her watching. She buzzed him into the building. He climbed the 4 flights of stairs without breathing hard and surveyed her destroyed apartment with the detached assessment of a crime scene investigator. "His men will not bother you again," he said simply. "Your men," Maya repeated. "The men who cleaned up Marcus." "My men." Tae-young's tone held no apology or justification. Marcus Johnson had a history of domestic violence across 3 states, outstanding warrants in 2 jurisdictions, and connections to several drug trafficking operations. His death will be investigated as gang-related retaliation. Your name will not appear in any official reports. Maya sank onto her overturned couch, still processing the casual efficiency with which her nightmare had been eliminated. "You killed him." "I eliminated a threat to someone under my protection." Tae-young sat across from her, his dark eyes steady and calm. Marcus Johnson chose violence as his primary method of controlling people. Eventually, violence was used to control him. The practical part of Maya's mind understood that Marcus's death solved an impossible problem. The moral part recoiled from how easily she was accepting his murder. The exhausted part just felt grateful that she could sleep tonight without checking the locks 3 times. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you decide whether you want to continue living as a victim of circumstances beyond your control or whether you want to accept protection that comes with opportunities." Tae-young leaned forward slightly, his attention focused entirely on her face. "I can offer you both safety and purpose, Maya, but the choice must be yours." Maya looked around her destroyed apartment, at the evidence of Marcus's final attempt to break her spirit, at the proof that running and hiding would never be enough. She thought about the business cards in her purse, about Kim Tae-young's quiet certainty, about the way he had eliminated an impossible problem with terrifying ease. "What kind of opportunities?" she asked. "The kind that use your intelligence and training for something more meaningful than serving wine to people who don't see you as fully human." Tae-young's voice carried respect that Marcus had never shown her. "The kind that ensure you never have to be afraid again." Maya Chen looked at the man who had just turned her world upside down and saved her life in the same evening, and realized she was about to make the most important decision of her life. "Tell me what you're offering," she said. Outside, the last of the police cars drove away from the scene of Marcus Johnson's death, leaving nothing but scorched asphalt and the promise of a future Maya had never dared to imagine. The Kim family estate wasn't merely a house. It was a fortress disguised as a palace, situated behind high stone walls in Seoul's most exclusive district. Maya stared through the sedan's tinted windows as they passed through electronic gates that closed with silent finality behind them. The main residence sprawled across manicured grounds, all glass and steel and architectural precision, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because everyone who mattered already knew. She had spent the night in a hotel suite that Tae-young's people had arranged, her destroyed apartment declared uninhabitable by the building management. This morning, a woman in an expensive black suit had arrived with new clothes in Maya's exact size and a polite but non-negotiable invitation to visit the estate. Everything felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life unfold from a great distance. Yesterday, she had been Maya Chun, struggling nursing student and restaurant server. Today she was sitting in a car that cost more than she would make in 5 years, wearing clothes that fit perfectly despite no one asking for her measurements, being driven to meet with a man who had eliminated her abuser with terrifying efficiency. The car stopped in front of the main entrance, where Tae-young waited in an impeccable charcoal suit that made him look like he belonged in boardrooms and government buildings. His dark hair was styled with mathematical precision, his bearing radiating the quiet authority she remembered from the restaurant. But there was something different in his expression as she approached, a warmth that hadn't been present during their previous encounters. "Maya, welcome." His voice carried genuine pleasure at seeing her. "I trust you slept well." "As well as could be expected," Maya replied, still processing the scale of wealth surrounding her. "This place is incredible. It serves its purpose." Tae-young gestured toward the entrance. "Shall we go inside? I have something to show you." The interior was even more impressive than the exterior, all soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered views of Seoul stretching to the horizon. Maya followed Taeyong through rooms that seemed designed for magazine photo shoots, each space perfectly appointed but somehow lacking the warmth of actual homes. They were walking toward what appeared to be an office wing when urgent voices echoed from a side corridor. Taeyong's expression sharpened immediately, his relaxed host demeanor disappearing behind something much more focused. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, but instead of leaving Maya in the hallway, he gestured for her to follow. They entered a room that had been hastily converted into a makeshift medical facility. A man in his early 30s lay on a dining table that someone had covered with clean sheets, his expensive shirt cut away to reveal a deep gash across his ribs. Blood soaked through makeshift bandages while two other men stood nearby looking helpless and increasingly panicked. "He needs a hospital," one of them was saying in Korean. "The bleeding won't stop." Taeyong surveyed the scene with calm assessment before turning to Maya. "This is Lieutenant Park. He encountered some difficulties during a business negotiation this evening. As you can see, the situation requires discreet medical attention." Maya stared at the injured man, her nursing training immediately cataloging the wound's depth and severity. It needed proper cleaning, possible stitches, definitely antibiotics, and monitoring for signs of internal bleeding. The man's pallor and rapid breathing suggested he was going into shock. "He needs proper medical care," she said automatically. "Which he cannot receive at a hospital," Taeyong replied. "Hospital records become police reports. Police reports become investigations. Investigations become complications for everyone involved." Maya looked between Taeyong's expectant expression and the injured man's deteriorating condition. This was a test, she realized, not of her loyalty or discretion, but of her competence under pressure. "I'll need supplies," she said, moving toward the table. "Sterile water, surgical thread, antiseptic, proper bandages, and something for pain management." 20 minutes later, Lieutenant Park's wound was properly cleaned and stitched, his vital signs stable and his color improving. Maya had worked with efficient focus, her hands steady as she treated what was obviously a knife wound without asking questions about its origin. The other men had watched her work with growing respect, murmuring appreciative comments in Korean. Taeyong had observed in silence, his dark eyes missing nothing as Maya demonstrated exactly the kind of skilled discretion his organization needed. "Excellent work," he said as Maya finished bandaging the wound. "Lieutenant Park will recover completely thanks to your intervention. He'll need antibiotics and observation for the next 48 hours, Maya said, washing her hands in the makeshift sink. "And someone should check the stitches daily for signs of infection, all of which you are qualified to provide." Taeyong's statement carried the weight of recognition and possibility. Maya studied his expression, understanding that they had moved beyond chance encounters and emergency assistance. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Kim?" "I am suggesting that we discuss a formal arrangement that would benefit both of us." Taeyong gestured toward the door. "Shall we speak privately in my office?" His office occupied the corner of the building, floor-to-ceiling windows offering commanding views of the city, while the interior radiated power and precision. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, and subtle technology created an atmosphere of serious business conducted at the highest levels. Maya sat in a chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent and tried to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. Taeyong settled behind his desk, his hands folded and his attention focused entirely on her face. The Kim family requires a private medical provider, someone with proper training who can treat injuries and illnesses that cannot be addressed through conventional healthcare channels. The position offers $150,000 annually, full payment of all educational expenses, and a secure living situation. Maya's breath caught. $150,000 was more money than she had ever imagined having. Enough to pay off all her student loans, enough to support herself through nursing school without working restaurant shifts, enough to build the kind of future she had only dreamed about. "What would be required in return?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Complete discretion regarding all medical situations you encounter. Absolute loyalty to the family's interests. Availability for emergency calls at any hour. And residence on the estate grounds for security purposes." Maya processed the terms carefully, looking for hidden clauses or unspoken expectations. This sounds like a legitimate medical position. It is a legitimate medical position. Taeyong's tone carried mild amusement. Did you expect something different? I expected there would be more significant complications given the circumstances. Maya gestured toward the door where Lieutenant Park was recovering. Treating knife wounds without police reports isn't exactly standard nursing practice. Standard nursing practice involves treating patients within a system that prioritizes bureaucracy over outcomes. Taeyong leaned forward slightly. The Kim family prioritizes results over paperwork. You would be treating people who need medical care but cannot access it through conventional means. Because they're criminals, Maya said bluntly. Because they operate outside conventional legal frameworks, Taeyong corrected. The distinction matters less than you might think when someone needs medical attention to survive. Maya stared out the windows at Seoul's glittering skyline, weighing impossible choices. The offer was everything she needed to transform her life, but accepting it meant crossing lines she had never imagined approaching. Treating criminals. Enabling violence. Becoming part of something dark and dangerous. You know everything about me, don't you? She said suddenly. I know that you completed 2 years of nursing school with a 4.0 grade average before Marcus Johnson's escalating abuse forced you to flee the United States. I know that you owe $67,000 in student loans that will take you 15 years to repay on a restaurant server's salary. I know that your mother died of treatable complications from diabetes because she couldn't afford proper medical care. Maya's throat tightened at the mention of her mother. That was 3 years ago, and you entered nursing school determined to prevent other families from facing the same loss. Taeyong's voice carried gentle understanding. The Kim family medical position would allow you to complete your education debt-free while providing health care to people who have nowhere else to turn. Is that not exactly what you hoped to accomplish? It's not the same thing, Maya protested weakly. Isn't it? Taeyong's dark eyes held hers with patient certainty. Medical care is medical care, whether you provide it in a hospital emergency room or a private residence. The difference is that here, you would be respected and compensated appropriately for your skills. Maya thought about the destroyed apartment, the years of hiding and fear, the constant struggle to afford basic necessities while pursuing an education that seemed perpetually out of reach. She thought about Lieutenant Park's grateful expression as she finished treating his wound, about the way Taeyong's men had looked at her with professional respect. What about living arrangements? She asked. You would occupy the east wing of the estate, a private apartment with separate entrance and complete autonomy. You would be free to continue your nursing education, maintain your own schedule when not needed for medical emergencies, and come and go as you choose within reasonable security protocols. And if I wanted to leave after some period of time. Taeyong's expression grew serious. After a minimum commitment of 6 months, you would be free to pursue other opportunities. However, the confidentiality requirements would remain permanent and non-negotiable. Betraying family medical information would have severe consequences. The threat was delivered with the same polite certainty as everything else, but Maya understood that severe consequences in Taeyong's world meant something final and irreversible. I need time to consider this offer. Of course. Taeyong opened a desk drawer and produced an elegant fountain pen and a document printed on heavy paper. However, Lieutenant Park requires continued medical attention beginning tonight. If you choose to provide that care, it would constitute acceptance of the position's terms and responsibilities. Maya stared at the contract, noting the precise legal language and the blood-red ink used for the signature lines. This was her crossroads moment, the choice between continuing to struggle alone or accepting protection that came with moral compromises. She thought about her mother, who had died because medical care was too expensive. She thought about all the people like Lieutenant Park who needed treatment but couldn't access it safely. She thought about the opportunity to complete her education and build a real future instead of just surviving from day to day. She picked up the fountain pen and signed her name in blood-red ink. Taeyong smiled for the first time since she had known him, the expression transforming his face completely. Welcome to the Kim family, Maya. I believe you will find this arrangement more rewarding than you anticipated. Outside, Seoul's lights glittered in the growing darkness, and Maya Shin began her new life as the private medical provider to one of Korea's most powerful criminal organizations. She told herself she was still the same person with the same values, just working within a different system. She almost believed it. 3 months into her residency at the Kim estate, Maya had treated 17 different injuries ranging from minor cuts to what she strongly suspected was a gunshot wound that Lieutenant Park claimed was a workplace accident. She had also discovered that Kim Tae-young remembered her class schedule better than she did. "It's Tuesday, which means you have pharmacology at 10, he said, appearing in her private apartment's kitchen with 2 cups of perfectly prepared coffee. He had taken to bringing her morning coffee twice a week, always timed to coincide with her most challenging academic days. Maya accepted the cup gratefully, noting how he had remembered exactly how she preferred it prepared. "You don't need to keep track of my education, Mr. Kim Tae-young." His correction was gentle but persistent. "And ensuring your academic success is an investment in the family's medical capabilities. A failing student cannot provide optimal care." But Maya had begun to suspect his attention wasn't entirely professional. She caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking, his dark eyes holding an intensity that had nothing to do with medical competence. And there were small gestures that seemed unnecessary for a business arrangement. The coffee, the way he ensured her favorite foods appeared in the estate's well-stocked kitchen, the expensive anatomy textbooks that arrived without explanation just before her midterm examinations. Her apartment in the East Wing had become a sanctuary she hadn't expected to love. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of Seoul's skyline, while the interior was decorated with warm colors and comfortable furniture that felt more like a home than a temporary living situation. She had her own entrance, complete privacy, and enough space to study without feeling confined. The work itself had surprised her. Maya had expected to spend her time treating obvious criminal injuries while pretending not to notice the violence that caused them. Instead, she found herself providing comprehensive health care to an extended family that included everyone from high-ranking organizational members to household staff to the elderly relatives who lived in the estate's family quarters. Mrs. Kim, Tae-young's 74-year-old grandmother, had become particularly fond of Maya after she successfully treated the older woman's chronic arthritis pain. Now Maya spent an hour every Wednesday afternoon checking Mrs. Kim's blood pressure and listening to stories about Tae-young's childhood. "He was such a serious little boy," Mrs. Kim said in her careful English, accepting the cup of medicinal tea Maya had prepared for her joint inflammation. "Always trying to protect everyone. Even when he was 6 years old, if another child was being bullied, Tae-young would step in." Maya could easily picture a miniature version of Tae-young facing down playground bullies with the same calm determination he brought to organizational threats. "What changed him, Mrs. Kim? He seems to carry so much weight." The older woman's expression grew sad. "He lost his sister when he was 32. Minji was his baby sister, only 24. Beautiful, sweet girl who trusted too easily. She died because Tae-young was building the family business and didn't notice she needed help." Maya's hands stilled as she adjusted Mrs. Kim's medication dosage. "Domestic violence." Mrs. Kim nodded gravely. Her boyfriend seemed nice, polite, charming, came to family dinners. But behind closed doors, he was a monster. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. Tae-young blames himself. Says he was too focused on power and money to protect the person who mattered most. That evening, Maya found herself thinking about Mrs. Kim's words as she studied in her apartment's living room. Textbooks and notes covered the coffee table while she worked through practice problems for her upcoming pathophysiology exam. The estate was quiet around her, most of the staff having gone home for the day. She was deep in concentration when soft footsteps in the hallway announced someone's approach. Maya looked up to find Tae-young standing in her doorway, still wearing the expensive black suit from whatever business had occupied his day, but with his tie loosened and his hair slightly disheveled. "I apologize for disturbing your studies," he said. "I wanted to discuss Lieutenant Park's progress and noticed your light was still on." Maya gestured toward the chair across from her coffee table. "He's healing well. The stitches can come out in another few days, and there's no sign of infection. He should have full mobility within 2 weeks." Tae-young settled into the chair with fluid grace, his presence somehow making the spacious room feel more intimate. "You've exceeded expectations in every aspect of your responsibilities, Maya. The family speaks of you with genuine respect and affection, including your grandmother," Maya said with a smile. "She tells fascinating stories about your childhood." Tae-young's expression grew cautious. I hope she hasn't been boring you with family history. She mentioned your sister. Maya watched his face carefully as she spoke. I'm sorry for your loss. For a long moment, Taeyong said nothing. His dark eyes focused on something beyond the windows, his controlled composure showing the first cracks Maya had ever seen. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and raw with old pain. Minji was everything good about our family. Sweet, kind, trusting. She saw the best in everyone, even when she should have been more careful. I was so focused on expanding the organization, on building power and influence, that I missed the signs that she was in trouble. Maya closed her textbook and gave him her full attention. What happened? Her boyfriend seemed perfect on the surface. University educated, good family background, respectful behavior during family gatherings. But privately, he was controlling and violent. She hid the abuse for months, making excuses for bruises and canceled plans. By the time she finally told our grandmother what was happening, the situation had escalated beyond intervention. Taeyong's hands clenched briefly before he forced them to relax. I was in Singapore closing a shipping deal when she called me, terrified and asking for help. I told her I would handle it when I returned to Seoul in 3 days. I was too busy with business to recognize that she didn't have 3 days. Maya felt her heart constrict with sympathy. He killed her. He killed her the next night. Made it look like a robbery gone wrong, but we knew better. By the time I returned to Seoul and eliminated him, Minji was already buried, and I was left with the knowledge that my sister died because I prioritized money and power over the people who should have mattered most. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest in a way that transformed everything Maya understood about Kim Taeyong. She saw past the controlled criminal boss to the grieving brother who carried his sister's death like a wound that would never heal. Is that why you helped me? Maya asked gently. Because I reminded you of her situation. Initially, yes. Taeyong met her eyes with painful honesty. When I saw Marcus grab your wrist in the restaurant, I saw Minji's fear all over again. I saw another woman being hurt by a man who felt entitled to her suffering. I couldn't save my sister, but I could save you. Maya felt tears gathering in her eyes. She had wondered about his motivation, had assumed it was attraction or possession or simple criminal opportunism. Learning that it stemmed from grief and the desire to prevent another tragedy made her chest tight with emotion. But that's not the only reason anymore. Taeyong continued, his voice dropping to something more intimate. Over these 3 months, you've become important to this family in ways that have nothing to do with Minji's memory. You're brilliant, capable, and kind. You've brought warmth to this house that's been missing for too long. Maya realized they were leaning toward each other across the coffee table, drawn together by the vulnerability of shared secrets. She could smell his cologne, something expensive with notes of cedar and bergamot. Could see the way his dark eyes had softened as he looked at her. You've given me safety and purpose, she said quietly. For the first time in years, I'm not afraid. I wake up excited about my studies and my work here. I feel valued for my skills and intelligence rather than just endured or controlled. Taeyong reached across the table and covered her hand with his, the contact sending warmth racing up her arm. You are valued, Maya. By the family, by the organization, and by me personally. More than you know. Their eyes met and held. The space between them charged with possibility and the recognition of growing feelings neither had acknowledged until now. Maya felt her breath catch as Taeyong's thumb traced gentle circles across her knuckles. The moment was shattered by the sharp buzz of Taeyong's phone. He answered immediately, his expression shifting back to business mode as he listened to whoever was speaking. Understood. Handle it discreetly and report back. Taeyong ended the call and looked at Maya with regret. I'm sorry, but there's a situation that requires my immediate attention. Of course. Maya pulled her hand back reluctantly, missing the warmth of his touch immediately. Business doesn't wait. Taeyong stood but hesitated at her doorway. Maya, what I shared with you tonight about Minji, about my reasons for helping you initially, that information is extremely private. I understand, Maya said. Your secrets are safe with me. He smiled then, the expression transforming his entire face. I know they are. That's one of the many reasons you've become so important to me. After he left, Maya sat surrounded by her textbooks, her hand still tingling where he had touched her. The conversation had changed something fundamental between them, shifting their relationship from professional arrangement towards something deeper and more complicated. She thought about Minji, about the parallels between their situations, about how Taeyong's grief had motivated him to become her protector. But she also thought about the way he looked at her now, with an intensity that had nothing to do with dead sisters or professional obligations. Maya Chun was falling in love with her employer, the head of a criminal organization, a man who solved problems through violence and commanded respect through fear. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. She returned to her studies with renewed focus, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and deeper complications. But for the first time in her adult life, she felt genuinely safe and genuinely valued for who she was rather than what someone else wanted her to become. Outside her windows, Seoul glittered with promise, and Maya allowed herself to imagine a future where safety and love coexisted in ways she had never dared to dream. The attack came on a Tuesday afternoon as Maya walked across Seoul National University's medical campus toward her advanced anatomy class. She had been living at the Kim estate for 4 months, had grown comfortable with the security protocols Taeyong insisted upon, had almost forgotten that his world contained enemies who might view her as a target. Almost. The black van pulled up beside the sidewalk with practiced precision, its sliding door opening before the vehicle had completely stopped. 3 men emerged with military efficiency, their movements coordinated and purposeful in a way that screamed professional operation. Maya's heart hammered as her training kicked in. Taeyong had insisted she learn basic self-defense and situational awareness, drills she had initially resented as paranoid overprotection. Now those lessons might save her life. She dropped her textbooks and ran. Behind her, footsteps pounded against concrete as the men gave chase through the campus courtyard. Maya sprinted toward the medical building's entrance, her nursing school ID ready to scan through the security doors that would slow her pursuers. Students scattered as she raced past, their startled voices creating a commotion that might bring campus security. She reached the building and slammed her palm against the emergency call button Taeyong had given her, a discreet panic device disguised as a medical alert bracelet. Then she swiped her ID and bolted through the security doors just as her pursuers reached the entrance. The men didn't follow immediately, probably unwilling to risk exposure on a monitored campus. Maya pressed herself against the interior wall and called Taeyong's private number with shaking fingers. He answered on the first ring. "Maya, they tried to take me," she gasped, still breathless from running. 3 men, black van, coordinated attack. "I'm in the medical building, but they might still be outside." The silence on the line was profound and terrible. When Taeyong spoke again, his voice carried a lethal calm that made Maya's blood run cold. "Stay exactly where you are. Do not move until my people arrive. They will be there in 4 minutes." Maya sank against the wall, adrenaline making her hands tremble as she processed what had just happened. Someone had targeted her specifically, which meant they knew about her relationship with Taeyong, knew she mattered enough to him that threatening her would accomplish something strategic. Security guards arrived first, followed moments later by 2 of Taeyong's men who moved with the same controlled efficiency she had learned to recognize. They escorted her to a waiting car without explanation, their eyes constantly scanning for additional threats as they left the campus. The drive to the estate passed in tense silence. Maya stared out the windows at Seoul's afternoon traffic while her mind raced through implications she didn't want to consider. If rival factions were targeting her, it meant war was coming to the Kim family. And war meant casualties. Taeyong was waiting in the estate's main entrance when they arrived, his expression carved from stone and his dark eyes blazing with controlled fury. He examined her carefully, checking for injuries with gentle hands that nevertheless radiated lethal potential. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. "No, they didn't catch me." Maya's voice sounded steadier than she felt. "But Taeyong, they knew exactly where to find me. They knew my schedule. Which means we have an information leak that will be addressed permanently." Taeyong's tone promised consequences for whoever had betrayed family security. "Right now, you're going to stay in the secure wing while I handle this situation." "What situation?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew. "The rival families have decided to test whether the Kim organization will go to war over one woman." Taeyong's smile was sharp and cold as winter. "They're about to receive a definitive answer." What followed was 24 hours of controlled violence that Maya witnessed only in fragments. Phone calls conducted in rapid Korean, men arriving at all hours with weapons and grim expressions, and the gradual emptying of the estate as Taeyong's forces deployed throughout Seoul. Maya spent the time in the medical wing, preparing supplies and equipment for casualties she prayed wouldn't materialize but knew were inevitable. She tried to focus on her textbooks, but concentration was impossible when the man she loved was orchestrating a criminal war to protect her. The first wounded arrived at dawn. Lieutenant Park stumbled through the medical bay doors supported by two other men, blood soaking through his shirt and his face gray with pain. Behind him came a steady stream of injured family members, testament to the night's violent resolution. Maya worked with methodical efficiency, treating gunshot wounds and knife injuries while trying not to think about the bodies that hadn't made it home. She stabilized fractures, sutured lacerations, and administered pain medication while the men spoke in hushed Korean about enemies eliminated and territories secured. Taeyong arrived last, walking under his own power, but moving with careful precision that suggested concealed injuries. His expensive suit was torn and blood-stained, his usually perfect hair disheveled, and there was something different in his eyes. Something darker and more final than Maya had seen before. "I need to examine you," Maya said, gesturing toward the treatment table. "It's not necessary." Taeyong's voice carried exhaustion beneath its usual control. "It's absolutely necessary." Maya's tone brooked no argument. "Sit down and let me do my job." For a moment they stared at each other, the tension of the past day finally surfacing in their mutual stubbornness. Then Taeyong smiled slightly and settled onto the examination table. Maya carefully helped him remove his jacket and shirt, revealing a tapestry of fresh bruises across his ribs and back. There was a deep cut along his left shoulder that had been hastily bandaged but needed proper cleaning and stitching. "How bad was it?" Maya asked as she prepared antiseptic and surgical thread. "The rival factions no longer exist." Taeyong's answer was simple and complete. "Every leader, every lieutenant, every foot soldier who participated in planning your abduction has been eliminated. The territory they controlled now belongs to the Kim family." Maya's hands stilled as she processed the scale of destruction he had unleashed for her protection. "How many people died?" "Enough to ensure you will never be threatened again." Taeyong met her eyes with steady certainty. "I told you when we first met that I could provide complete and permanent protection. This is what that promise looks like when tested." She resumed, cleaning his wounds, her touch gentle despite the magnitude of violence he had committed. "You did this for me. I did this because someone threatened what belongs to me." Taeyong's voice dropped to something more intimate and possessive. "Because someone thought they could use you to weaken me, not understanding that you've become the source of my strength rather than a vulnerability." Maya's breath caught as she applied stitches to his shoulder wound. "What are you saying?" Taeyong reached up with his uninjured arm and cupped her face with his hand, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone with reverent gentleness. "I'm saying that you're mine, Maya. Mine to protect, mine to cherish, mine to keep safe from anyone who would dare threaten you. I'm saying that I would burn down Seoul itself before I let someone take you from me." The intensity in his dark eyes made her heart race. She had known their relationship was evolving beyond professional arrangement, but hearing him claim her so completely sent heat racing through her veins. "And what if I don't want to belong to anyone?" she whispered, though they both knew it was a token protest. "Then I would respect your choice and spend the rest of my life ensuring your freedom and safety." Taeyong's voice was raw with emotion. "But I would also spend that time hoping you might choose to belong to me the way I already belong to you." Maya finished the final stitch and set aside her medical supplies, her hands trembling slightly as she processed his confession. "You belong to me. Completely and irrevocably." Taeyong pulled her closer until she was standing between his knees, her hands resting on his chest. "You've healed something in me that I thought was permanently broken, Maya. You've given me reasons beyond revenge and power to protect what matters." Maya looked into his eyes and saw past the criminal boss to the man who had declared war to keep her safe, who had eliminated entire organizations to ensure her security, who had chosen her over everything else in his dangerous world. "Then I'm yours," she said simply. "And you're mine, broken pieces and all." Taeyong's smile was brilliant and transformative as he pulled her down for their first kiss. gentle despite the violence that had brought them to this moment. Maya melted against him, tasting promise and possession and the beginning of a love that would reshape both their worlds. Outside, Seoul continued its daily routine, unaware that the balance of criminal power had shifted permanently in a single night. But in the medical bay of the Kim estate, Maya Chin accepted that she belonged to Korea's most dangerous man and discovered that surrender had never felt more like victory. 6 months after the night that had reshaped Seoul's criminal landscape, Maya Chin stood in the medical facility she had designed and built within the Kim estate grounds, reviewing inventory lists while morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. The space was a testament to what unlimited resources and genuine respect could accomplish. State-of-the-art equipment, pharmaceutical supplies that rivaled major hospitals, and the kind of comprehensive setup that allowed her to provide world-class medical care regardless of the circumstances that brought patients to her door. Dr. Maya Chin now, having completed her nursing degree summa cum laude with Taeyong's unwavering support. The diploma hung in a place of honor on the wall, next to her newly acquired medical license, and the family portrait taken at last month's board meeting where she had been formally recognized as the Kim organization's chief medical officer. She had never imagined that love could feel like this. Safe and passionate, challenging and nurturing, built on mutual respect rather than control or dependence. Taeyong had kept every promise he had made that first night, providing her with security, purpose, and a future that exceeded her wildest dreams. The sound of approaching footsteps drew her attention. Taeyong entered the medical facility wearing an impeccable navy suit, his dark hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, carrying 2 cups of coffee and the morning newspapers. He had maintained the habit of bringing her coffee several mornings each week, though now the gesture carried romantic intimacy rather than professional courtesy. "Good morning, Dr. Chun," he said with the warm smile reserved exclusively for her. "How are the new supply orders progressing?" Maya accepted her coffee gratefully, noting that he had remembered to add the extra cream she had started preferring since discovering she was 3 months pregnant. "Everything should arrive by Friday. The new surgical equipment will expand our trauma capabilities significantly." "Excellent. The organization has been discussing expansion into Busan, which may increase demand for discreet medical services." Taeyong's tone carried the casual authority of someone whose decisions shape the fate of entire regions. "Of course, that discussion depends on your availability and interest in overseeing additional facilities." Maya smiled at how naturally he included her in strategic planning, valuing her medical expertise as much as her personal opinion. "I think one facility at a time is sufficient, especially given our current circumstances." Taeyong's eyes dropped to her still flat stomach, his expression growing soft with wonder and possessive protectiveness. "Our circumstances," he repeated quietly. "I still can barely believe it." The pregnancy had been unplanned but welcomed with joy that surprised them both. Maya had expected Taeyong to worry about security implications or organizational vulnerabilities. Instead, he had immediately begun planning for expanded family quarters and had spent hours researching the best pediatric specialists in Seoul. "Speaking of circumstances," Taeyong continued, reaching into his jacket pocket, "I have something important to discuss with you." He produced a small velvet box that made Maya's heart skip despite their months together. She had known this conversation was inevitable, had even hoped for it, but seeing the physical symbol of permanent commitment still made her breath catch. "Maya Chun," Taeyong said, dropping to one knee beside her desk chair with fluid grace. "You have transformed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've brought light to darkness, purpose to power, and love to a heart I thought was permanently closed. Will you marry me and become my partner in all things for the rest of our lives?" The ring was spectacular, a flawless diamond surrounded by sapphires in a setting that somehow managed to be both traditional and modern. But what made tears gather in Maya's eyes was the vulnerability in Taeyong's expression, the way this powerful man waited for her answer with genuine uncertainty. "Yes," Maya whispered, then louder, "Yes, of course, yes." Taeyong slipped the ring onto her finger with reverent care, then stood and pulled her into his arms for a kiss that tasted like promises and forever. Maya melted against him, marveling at how completely their lives had intertwined, how naturally love had grown from protection and respect. When they finally broke apart, Taeyong rested his forehead against hers. "I want to give you everything, Maya. A traditional Korean ceremony to honor my family's heritage, a celebration that includes your American traditions, and legal protections that ensure you and our children will always be safe regardless of what happens to me." Maya's throat tightened at his casual reference to his own mortality, the way men in his position learned to plan for worst-case scenarios. "Nothing is going to happen to you," she said fiercely. "I intend to live a very long life with you and our children," Taeyong agreed. "But I also intend to ensure that if circumstances beyond my control arise, you will have every legal and financial protection possible." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Kim, Taeyong's grandmother, who entered the medical facility with the slow dignity of her 74 years. She had become Maya's strongest ally within the family hierarchy, often serving as cultural translator and emotional support during Maya's integration into Korean traditions. "Grandmother," Taeyong said, helping the older woman to a comfortable chair. "Perfect timing. Maya has just agreed to marry me." Mrs. Kim's weathered face broke into a brilliant smile. "About time," she said in her careful English. "I was beginning to worry you would both be too stubborn to admit what everyone else could see months ago." Maya laughed, remembering all the pointed comments Mrs. Kim had made about suitable daughters-in-law and the importance of family continuity. "Were we really that obvious? My grandson has been in love with you since the first week you lived here," Mrs. Kim said with satisfaction. "And you have been watching him with the same expression I wore when I met my husband 60 years ago." Taeyong's ears reddened slightly at his grandmother's directness, but his arm around Maya's waist tightened possessively. "Grandmother has already planned the entire wedding ceremony," he said wryly. "Someone needed to plan it," Mrs. Kim replied with dignity. "You were both too busy pretending this was still a business arrangement to handle proper courtship rituals." The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the estate's formal gardens, a ceremony that blended Korean traditions with African-American customs in ways that honored both their heritages. Maya wore a traditional hanbok for the Korean portions of the ceremony, then changed into a flowing white gown that her deceased mother would have loved for the Christian elements. The guest list included family members, trusted associates, and several prominent business leaders who understood that this marriage represented more than personal happiness. Maya Chun was now Mrs. Kim Maya, protected by one of the most powerful names in Korea, her medical expertise backed by resources that made her untouchable. 3 months into their marriage, Maya established satellite medical clinics in 2 additional Kim-controlled territories, her reputation for discretion and excellence making her services highly sought after throughout Seoul's underground economy. She had become something unprecedented, a criminal organization's medical authority who commanded respect based on professional competence rather than family connections. The threats that had once seemed so overwhelming had become distant memories. Marcus was dead, his abuse reduced to scars that Taeyong kissed with reverent gentleness. The rival factions that had targeted her were eliminated, their territories absorbed into Kim operations. Maya's safety was ensured not just by her husband's protection, but by her own value to the broader criminal community. Now, 8 months pregnant and reviewing patient files in her expanded medical facility, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had walked into Zenith Restaurant as a frightened woman hiding from an abusive past, struggling to survive while pursuing impossible dreams. She had walked out as the beloved wife of Seoul's most powerful criminal boss, her medical expertise protected and celebrated, her future secured beyond anything she had ever dared to imagine. The baby kicked strongly against her ribs, as if responding to her thoughts about the future. Their child would grow up with choices Maya had never had: excellent education, complete security, and parents who loved each other with intensity that had reshaped both their worlds. Taeyong had promised that their children could choose legitimate business paths if they preferred, could attend university anywhere in the world, could live normal lives protected by family resources but free from family obligations. Maya believed him completely. Outside her medical facility windows, Seoul glittered with evening lights and endless possibilities. Maya Kim touched her wedding ring and smiled, remembering the terrified waitress who had flinched when her abuser walked through a restaurant door. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger and safer and infinitely more loved than she had ever believed possible. Protection had become partnership, survival had become prosperity, and fear had become a love so powerful it could stop wars and reshape empires. Maya Chun had found her forever in the arms of a dangerous man who had proven that sometimes the darkest places could nurture the brightest light.